You ever go photograph a sporting event, feel like you were absolutely crushing it the whole time? You were dialed in, all your settings were locked in, seeing everything, anticipating everything. Then you get home and dump your SD card, and it looks like you let a drunk squirrel borrow your camera. Just absolute chaos. A blurry mess, a bunch of missed moments. Ball's not even in the frame half the time. The kids are blinking like they were just pepper sprayed. And you're sitting there like, I was literally 10 feet away from greatness. How did I come home with this? Meanwhile, you see other photographers posting from the same game, and it looks like a Nike ad campaign. So either they're shooting on some magical camera blessed by the photography gods, or, and this is the part that people don't want to admit, they just know what they're doing. The good news is it's fixable, because I shoot this stuff constantly. I'm the marketing director at Oak Ridge Military Academy. I'm covering all kinds of athletic games, ceremonies, chaos, kids sprinting everywhere. I don't get second chances. Everything is live. If a cadet earns an award, the salute happens once. If a kid hits the ball, the swing happens once. You don't get a redo. You either got it or you didn't. So if your sports photos suck right now, it's not bad luck. It's usually not your camera betraying you in your time of need. It's a handful of typically very fixable mistakes that not a whole lot of people really explain. Everybody loves to show off their work as sports photographers and videographers, but a lot of people don't break down the basics. And we're going to try to fix that. First thing, your gear is not the problem. I know you want it to be, you're sitting there thinking, if I just had that one lens or if I just upgraded my body. No. I shoot mostly on my Z8. Nikon, yeah. It's fast, it's reliable, it's sturdy. But if I handed my camera to someone who doesn't understand sports photography, they would come back with the exact same trash that a lot of people are complaining about getting right now. And if I grabbed their much cheaper camera, whatever it is, I could still get usable shots. And that's not me bragging or claiming to be some absolute expert. I'm just a guy who put in a ton of time and practice to get halfway decent at this. And I'll overlay this with some examples of the work I've been doing. But this is not about gear. This is about decisions, fast ones. Let's talk about things that are probably wrecking your photos right out of the gate. Your settings, the quick and dirty basics, because there's plenty of in-depth tutorials for every camera that's on the market. Just YouTube whatever your current setup is and you'll be able to find all the nitty-gritty details. I don't shoot like that. I worry about as little as I can, focus on what really matters in the moment, and try to simplify, because I'm typically running multiple cameras for photo and video, and that's a whole nother story. But we'll start with the most basic one, especially when talking about sports. That's shutter speed. It's the one that quietly ruins everything. If you're shooting sports at 1/250, I don't need to see your photos. I already know they're bad. You need to be typically at least 1/1000. That's like the minimum where things start to kind of look intentional. For baseball, 1/1600 is probably the lowest I go, unless it's just some crazy terrible lighting and I've got to go lower. But I'm typically 2000, a little higher, 25. If you can get that, that's great. That'll help you freeze that bat, freeze the ball. That's what you need. Football, soccer, volleyball, same thing. Basketball is a little different. Our gym's got, crummy indoor yellow lighting. A lot of times I'm hovering in that 1250 range. If I gotta go to 1000, I try to stay above it, but you do what you gotta do with the lighting that you have. If your concern is, my ISO is gonna be high, good, let it be high. I would much rather have a sharp but slightly noisy photo than a perfectly clean blur that looks like some stupid modern art. Noise can be fixed. Motion blur can't. It's that simple for me. And stop being scared of ISO like it's gonna break your camera and call your mom. Modern cameras handle ISO pretty well. You're not shooting on a potato from 2006. Now, aperture. You want light. You want subject separation. If your lens can do 2.8, use it. If you need a little bit more depth, fine. 3.2 to 4, I go up into the low 5 range. But if you're out here shooting at f8, like you're documenting the entire ecosystem of the field, I mean, what are we doing? That's not a landscape shot at the Grand Canyon. You don't need everything in focus from the dugout to the parking lot. You want the subject to pop. You want the background to disappear at least a little. Typically I'm shooting at 2.8 with my finger ready to bump up maybe a couple of notches. For example, I'm shooting a lot of baseball and softball right now, and 2.8 works for pretty much everything I'm doing if you're good at locking on your subject. But occasionally, they'll do a mound visit, or right at the end of an inning, they all come running in and huddle together, and I'll crank it up to, somewhere around 5.6 so I can get multiple people in focus. But that comes with practice and timing and when you need it. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the next one, which is autofocus. This is where people kind of get a little weird. Use continuous autofocus. Use subject tracking if your camera has it, which pretty much every modern one does. Use whatever the area that you feel comfortable with, like 3D tracking or the little box and it grabs whoever's centermost in your frame. Learn to make a custom box. Most cameras will allow you. I like a nice, relatively skinny, vertical, rectangular box that grabs the player that's in the middle. But here's the thing, again, I don't really hear a lot in other advice videos. You still have to aim. People turn on subject tracking like it's some kind of autopilot and then just wave the camera around hoping that it figures it out. No, you still need to put that focus point on the player you care about, and you need to stay on them. And if your camera loses them, that's on you. Reacquire and stay disciplined. Now let's talk about the actual reason some people get great photos and others don't. That's anticipation. That's everything in sports photography. If you're reacting to what just happened, you're already too late. You missed it. By the time you hear the crack of the bat and then bring your camera up, congratulations, you just photographed the aftermath. Instead, you need to start thinking like the game. In baseball, you watch the pitcher. You watch the count. You see the situation. If I'm focused on a shot for one of my players batting, I'm going to get it composed the way I want, focused on his face, and then out of the corner of my eye, I'm watching the pitcher, so I know when to start hitting the shutter. The more you do it, the more you practice with whatever sport you're shooting, you'll start to get a feel for it. And when you can feel something's about to happen, you need to already be locked in. Finger half pressed, back button focus if you're one of those people, ready to fire before the action even starts. Same thing in basketball. You see a player driving through the lane, you know a shot or a pass is coming. In football, the quarterback drops back, you know where your eyes need to be. You're not chasing moments, you're trying to predict them. And when you start doing that, everything changes. And that goes hand in hand with the next thing, which is positioning. This one hurts a lot of feelings, but it's true. Where you stand matters more than the lens you have on your camera. I've been doing this for a few years now, so I've seen quite a few people standing in the worst possible spots and then blaming their gear. Because they've kind of come to know that I'm the photographer that's always around there. So a lot of the other hobbyist photographers will come up and chat with me, and those are usually great. I love those conversations. But a handful of them, like my one advice when they ask me, what can I do to get move? The answer is move. I watch you spend the entire game sitting in one seat, taking the same picture over. You got to move. It's that simple. And basketball is probably the worst one I see. People just sitting dead center, bottom row, half court. And yeah, I get it. Those are the best seats in the house. That's where you want to watch a game. But it's the freaking worst spot to be a photographer. Every shot you get will either be the side of their head or the back of their head. Go to the baselines. Go to the corners. Move up and down around the baseline. Standing, kneeling, sitting, all of those. In baseball, I'm moving pretty much the entire game. When my team's batting, I'm typically going to be over on the first base side, so I can get all my right-handers. I've got one left-hander on the team I need to adjust for. When they're fielding, I'm over on third base by our dugout, or right behind home plate so I can get that straight-on shot of the pitcher. Or over on the first base side, I can get anything going to third base. Just move around. Get used to where your players are. And a lot of times that positioning will depend on where my focus is that day. It might be, a particular player or two or three players that I'm really focusing on because maybe I didn't get them last week or they weren't there, or, it might be senior night is coming up and I need to get some more coverage of the seniors, whatever it may be. I'm paying attention to who I'm trying to focus on that day. Sometimes that means being in the dugout if you have permission, which I do. I work there, so I can go wherever I want. But as just a hobbyist or a parent, make sure you're allowed to be. And a lot of times they'll say yes. If you're close enough with the teams, they'll let you go to places that other people might not. You just have to ask. And why do I do that? Why do I go in the dugout, in the team room for some of the... I want the faces. I want the angles. I want something that looks like a human actually took the photo. If all you're getting is the back of helmets and hats and numbers, that's not a camera problem, that's a you problem. And please, for the love of God, change your height. Get lower. Getting higher is easier if there's stands, and sometimes those photos are kind of cool, but get lower. You want the hero shots in sports a lot of times. If you're standing upright the whole game, your photos are going to look like a concerned parent documenting their child's participation. Get low, kneel down, sit, be uncomfortable, get your pants dirty. Low angles add drama instantly. It makes everything feel more intense, more professional. Go look at any professional sporting event. Where are all the camera people? They're usually sitting, cross-legged, in the end zone or in the baseline. But they also get up and move. It's not a stand in one place and hope for the best activity. Between innings, during timeouts, whenever there's a break, you should be repositioning often. That doesn't mean constantly running around. Have a plan, know where you're going. But your feet matter a heck of a lot more than the zoom range on your camera. Now let's talk about burst shooting, because again, this is where people do nothing or go completely insane. You do need bursts. This is sports. Things happen fast. But if you're holding that shutter down, shooting, 20 raw photos a second, and you're just sitting there spraying and praying, you're going to have a miserable day at home the next day. Be intentional about your bursts. You want, the word I always use, especially when I'm working with other photographers, is you want controlled bursts. A handful of shots at the peak moment. That's it. You don't need to go absolutely nuts. And a lot of times I have either my kids who are cadets there or other cadets that want to shoot with me. And I always have a couple extra cameras and I try to give them very basic instructions. And I'm telling them, hey, that camera's fast. Don't just hold the button down. Don't give me 9 hours of editing tomorrow just to go through it all. But use the tools that your camera is able to do. Modern technology is incredible. Don't just sit there and hold the button down. Pay attention to what's coming and make your day, the next day, your editing day, make it as easy as you can. If you shoot 40 frames of the same play, you didn't increase your chances. You just created a nightmare for yourself when you're culling. And this comes with time and practice, but I will preface that or follow that with, don't be afraid to overshoot. I tell all my students that I work with and any other photographers I work with, because it was kind of pounded into me when I used to work for a photography company to not overshoot. And I was like, especially early on, why does it matter? I would rather overshoot and make sure I get the shot than try to be so picky about when to pull the trigger that you miss stuff. So early on, don't be afraid to overshoot. You'll get better at it. All your storage, your culling, all the editing after the fact will get better too. So don't be afraid of taking lots of pictures, but just be intentional about it to the best of your ability. And here's another one tip that sounds a little obvious, but when I was coming up and learning, no one really talked about it. I didn't hear about it until I was well into doing this for a while. The ball matters. If the ball's not in the photo is immediately less interesting. Not always, but most of the time. In baseball, ball on the bat or right in front of the bat, ball about to go in the glove, midair. Basketball, the ball leaving the hand right at the rim. Football, the ball in flight or right before the catch. If there's no ball, a lot of times there's no story. It just looks like someone aggressively standing around. And again, that's Most of the time, there's still plenty of shots in sports where the ball isn't involved, but a story is still there. You just have to find them. Think about, reactions and celebrations. And while we're at it, faces matter more than anything. Emotion is what makes sports so entertaining. Effort, focus, celebration, frustration. If I can't see a face, the photo typically will lose its impact almost immediately. There are some creative pictures from the back that you can get. I always have some cool ones with the coach and whatnot, but you need faces. So again, position yourself to capture faces. That's why all this other stuff matters. Now, while we're on that subject, let's talk about timing, because this is where you go from kind of okay to actually good. You're not just shooting action, you're shooting peak action. The difference between a mediocre photo and a great one is usually a small fraction of a second. Bat just before contact, meh, but the bat bending, the ball compressing, that's the shot. The player just holding the ball is okay, but the ball leaving their hand right as they're throwing it, that's the shot. That comes back to anticipation and controlled bursts and moving, being in the right spot. Now to everybody's favorite part, the editing, because people either don't do enough or they turn their photos into a Marvel movie. First, you got to start with your culling process. From a single game, and a lot of times I'm not even there for the full game. I might just be there for a couple innings or a half or whatever. I'll still come home with 3,000-4,000 photos. And out of that 3,000 to 4,000, I'm not delivering 800. That would be insane. Pick the best, the sharpest, the ones of actual moments. Your job's not to show every single thing that happened. Your job's to show what mattered. Now that can get a little tricky because I also want to try my best to get at least a couple of shots of every kid. Starters and non-starters, and this is where warm-ups are your best friend. In my case, yes, I'm trying to shoot to be able to use stuff for marketing content, but I also like providing that service to the players and their families to have those memories. So I want a little bit of content of everybody that's on the team. And in our case, at our military academy, a lot of these kids are playing a sport for the first time. They've never played, so they might not get a lot of playing time. And that's where warm-ups are your best friend. You can get great shots of everybody in a controlled environment where, I can even get on the field or on the court and just get those cool shots of everyone. And that way, I can focus on more creative, cool shots during the game because I already got some good shots of everyone. But when it comes to the editing process, keep it simple. Shoot raw. Pay attention to your exposure, contrast, color. I'll crop in a little bit if I need to, do a quick mask of my subject in the background, get that separation by juggling your darks and your highlights. Don't overthink it. You're not creating some cinematic universe, you're documenting reality. On a given week, I could be editing between 10 to 40,000 photos. I don't have time to spend an hour making a single photo absolutely perfect. Figure out a workflow that benefits you and is easily repeatable. And one more thing people don't really think about, and I don't hear it in a lot of, camera advice, photography advice, content. You are telling a story. It's not just action. It's the bench. It's the reactions, the coach yelling, the teammates celebrating in the background, the quiet moments, the crowd. Some of the best photos from any game are not even the big plays. They're the in-between stuff that actually feels human. If your photos aren't getting better, it's not because you need a new camera, a new lens, or a new preset pack from some influencer who shoots in a parking lot. It's because you're not being intentional. You're just showing up and hoping something good happens. You need to pay attention. Review your mistakes. Figure out why something didn't work. And then adjust it the next time. That's it. Use resources online, find other photographers, and ask their honest opinion. Yeah, you can do some of the photography groups, but those are a nightmare. I'd rather talk one-on-one with a photographer, and I've had photographers send me stuff. Again, I'm not some crazy, super professional expert. I've been doing this for a number of years. I'm pretty proud of the work that I put out there, but I gladly have conversations with newbies and pros I love to get feedback on my work because I'm learning stuff all the time. I love this. And I'd be more than happy to give advice to anybody that sends me their work and they want to know what I think about it. I'm a Nikon shooter. I don't mind getting the hate. And I've shot on everything. I go back to Nikon. It's my favorite. They just have the best colors. But there's no shortcuts. There's no hacks. There's no one weird trick that'll make your sports photography better today. No, it's just reps with intention. Because sports photography is hard. Everything is moving. You don't get second chances. You don't get to control the lighting. Nobody cares after the fact that it was almost a good shot. It either is or it isn't. That's what I love about it. But once you actually start thinking while you're shooting and ahead of time, anticipation, positioning, dialing in your settings, timing your shots, you stop coming home with 2,000 or 3,000 useless photos, and you start coming home with 30 to 50 that actually matter. And that's the whole game.